This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, April 28th. Welcome to Africa 54. We continue to work remotely because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But what hasn't changed is our commitment to bringing you the latest and most important news from the African continent and around the world. This is today's Africa 54. Demonstrators took to the streets of Chad's capital, N'Djamena, on Tuesday, calling for a transition to civilian rule. They defied a ban on protests imposed by the military during a period of national mourning for President Idris Deby. Protesters burnt tires in the middle of the street as they walked and jogged through the capital, chanting together and whistling. Video uploaded to social media shows at least 2 people were killed and 27 wounded in the street clashes on Tuesday between protesters and security forces, prompting key ally France to condemn the crackdown. France, which has a military presence in Chad and was a long-term backer of Deby, who it considered an important ally in the struggle against Islamist extremists in the Sahel region of Africa, also condemned the use of force against demonstrators. 2 Spanish journalists and an Irish citizen were killed in an armed ambush on an anti-poaching patrol near a nature reserve in eastern Burkina Faso, according to the Burkinabe and Spanish authorities. The 3 foreigners and a member of the Burkinabe armed forces went missing on Monday after a morning attack on a convoy of security forces, forest rangers and expatriates, according to Burkina Faso's government. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez said the 2 journalists, Beriain and Roberto Fraile, had been filming a documentary before they were killed. The Burkinabe government reported an increase in violence elsewhere in the past 72 hours, with around 10 civilians killed in a spate of armed raids on villages. For a second year, Nigeria's Muslim population, the largest in West Africa, is celebrating the holy month of Ramadan under the cloud of COVID-19. Nigeria's mosques have resumed communal prayers and daily fast breaking, which were banned last year, raising concerns among health officials. Timothy Obiezu reports from the capital, Abuja.
Issa Idris joins hundreds of others here at Abuja's Nasfat Mosque to observe special evening prayers. It's his daily routine since the start of Ramadan 2 weeks ago. After, they proceed to the iftar, a large meal to break the day's fasting.
As of last year, even for food in my house, sincerely speaking, God bear me witness, there is passion in my mouth. I found it difficult. It was my mom that helps me. But unfortunately this year, I get food in my house and I do my iftar here and I also do my sahur here.
The sahur and iftar are meals to mark the beginning and end of a day's fasting. This mosque usually provides free meals for hundreds of Muslims through the Ramadan. But daily feasts and communal prayers were halted last year as the coronavirus restrictions held firm. Many like Idris, who depended on such meals, struggled to get by as mosques opted for alternative ways to hold prayers.
Most of our lectures last year were online lectures, and people don't come to the mosque last year to observe Tarawih. People don't come for the 5 daily prayers.
But this year, with Nigeria seeing a lower number of cases, mosques across the country are once again holding regular meetings and prayers. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization and Nigeria's CDC are warning of a possible rise of COVID cases during Ramadan. Mosque officials say they're taking steps to prevent that.
And as we are entering the mosque, there is provision for you to wash your hand. We have a tap, about 4 or 5 taps at the gates. So as you are entering, the first place that you go to, there is an arrow, and there are some security personnel that will ensure that you wash your hand.
With safety measures in place, Ramadan this year is a more pleasant experience for Nigerian Muslims like Issa Idris. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Amid criticism that the U.S. response to India's COVID-19 crisis has been slow, President Joe Biden says the U.S. is sending a whole range of critical assistance to India, which is overwhelmed by a deadly second wave of the coronavirus. VOA senior diplomatic correspondent Cindy Sain has this report.
Funeral pyres are burning across India, as close to 200,000 people have died from the coronavirus. In New Delhi, a parking lot was turned into a makeshift crematorium, with residents saying they have never witnessed such scenes. Families in hospitals like this one in Bareilly are arguing with nurses and doctors as their loved ones are dying due to a lack of oxygen. President Joe Biden said he spoke at length with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Monday, and the U.S. is immediately sending a whole series of specific help that he needs.
We are sending the actual mechanical parts that are needed for the machinery they have to build a vaccine. We're also I've discussed with him when we'll be able to send actual vaccines to India, which will be my intention to do.
Biden said the U.S. needs to quickly make sure that other vaccines, such as Novavax, are approved for use, and then it can share actual vaccines as well as know-how with other countries like India that so desperately need them. Defense Department spokesman John Kirby said the Pentagon is mobilizing.
The department is working closely with other U.S. agencies to rapidly deploy oxygen-related equipment, rapid testing kits, personal protective equipment, and other essential materials to our Indian partners.
Kirby said the U.S. will also provide India's frontline healthcare workers with support. With the dramatic surge of cases in India, human rights advocates say at their meeting next week, members of the World Trade Organization need to temporarily waive intellectual property rights in a bid to widen access to COVID-19 vaccines to more countries.
But the Biden administration is certainly in a position to say, you know what, this is a crisis. India has, 300,000 new infections per day. We are going to temporarily suspend our hold on this intellectual property and make sure that they can produce as many vaccines as possible.
Other experts say the crisis in India demands a global response, such as this medical aid arriving in India from Britain.
It's going to require other countries in Europe and China to help Indians deal with what I think is just going to be a shocking death toll from this rise of the numbers in the pandemic.
Analysts say the shocking images from India may stir a change in thinking about sharing vaccines and life-saving medications. Cindy Sain, VOA News.
In East Africa, Somalia President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed is dropping his attempt to extend his term by 2 years. Mohamed gave in to local and international pressure to not continue his grip on power after clashes and demonstrations in the capital, Mogadishu. In a televised statement in the early hours of Wednesday, the president called for urgent discussions with the signatories to an agreement signed last September on the conduct of the elections.
The federal government of Somalia has always believed and still sees dialogue, compromise, negotiations, and the return to the discussion table as the only viable options while honoring the September 17, 2020 agreement and the recommendations of the Baidoa Technical Committee on Electoral Model.
The president's term expired in February, but the country failed to hold elections as planned. Earlier this month, the lower house of parliament voted to extend Mohamed's 4-year term by another 2 years. The Senate rejected the move, provoking a political crisis. With this week marking 100 days of Joe Biden's U.S. presidency, European allies are noting the change in the key relationship with Washington. Henry Ridgwell reports from London on how the new administration is being viewed from across the Atlantic.
Even via video link, the transatlantic change in tone is palpable. Joe Biden's US presidency has brought radical change to the alliance, and Europe has warmly welcomed the transformation, says analyst Leslie Vinjamuri.
He wants to work in concert with America's allies and partners and most especially those who are in Europe. So I think that has been absolutely critical. And the fact that Biden's been so quick off the block to bring America firmly back into the key multilateral institutions and to really draw a line in a good way under America's commitments to climate and to health.
The United States has rejoined the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Agreement. Biden's Secretary of State has twice visited Brussels, underlining support for NATO and the European Union. Washington has also joined talks aimed at reviving the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which Europe sees as a triumph of its diplomacy. The former Trump administration withdrew from the accord, viewing it as seriously flawed. Biden also has taken a new approach with US rivals, labeling his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin a killer and imposing 2 rounds of sanctions on Moscow.
The new sanctions were kind of more serious than the sanctions introduced by Donald Trump during the previous 4 years. And Russia saw that as Russia was frustrated. Russian government did not understand what was going on.
Meanwhile, Russia has sent over 100,000 troops to the Ukrainian border, widely seen as a test of President Biden.
He knows that inevitably, Russia in particular, China and others will test a new president with a crisis or a confrontation that was unanticipated early in the presidency. And I think Biden decided to anticipate that and to move on the chessboard before the other powers did. He sent them a message that there's new leadership here.
In Moscow, Russians who spoke to VOA said US relations have deteriorated under President Biden.
I quite dislike him because it seems to me he is quite aggressive in relation to Russia.
I know he is not very positive about Russia. That is the only thing I know.
With China, the Biden administration has accused Beijing of carrying out acts of genocide against the Uyghur population in Xinjiang province. China denies the accusations. This week, the US president recognized Turkey's killing of around 1 million Armenians during World War I as genocide.
It's a consequential decision. It won't make it easy, either with Turkey when it comes to their Armenians or with China when it comes to Xinjiang, to pursue the kind of cooperation that is also essential and also extremely important, not only for the world, but for the Biden administration. So it is complicated. And I think this is, in some senses what we're all waiting to see. Where will those trade-offs need to be made?
For now, analysts say Biden is still enjoying a political honeymoon with European allies. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Would like to hear what you think about Africa 54. Join the discussion on Facebook. Our address is Africa54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also, check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, equipping Nigeria's underserved communities with 21st century digital knowledge. We'll be right back.
On Straight Talk Africa, the distribution of COVID-19 vaccines has started as new variants of the coronavirus are spreading across Africa. Join me, Linor Moudou, and a panel of experts to answer your questions about COVID-19, the vaccines, and assess Africa's response 1 year after the pandemic on a special edition of Straight Talk Africa.
In our tech news, a Nigerian startup, We Lead, exposes young boys in underserved communities to the world of digital literacy and equips them with the basic digital knowledge required to succeed in the 21st century. Africa 54's technology correspondent Paul Ndiho via Skype spoke to Dayo Oladele Ilori, founder of We Lead, a Lagos-based non-profit initiative that trains young boys and girls with social competence skills and mental well-being.
Dayo Ilori, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much.
You run some training academies in Lagos, Nigeria. Can you maybe start by bringing me up to date what those training academies all about?
Nigeria is a peculiar country where we have a lot of organizations working with women. However, we have identified that there is a gap in the boys' space, and of course, the gap in the women's space remains. So how do we match the two? That is how we came about birthing We Lead, which started in 2017. We're doing most of our training in schools. So we have groups of schools, and we're able to reach out to over 30 schools, training over 5,000 boys. However, when COVID struck, we moved our classes online. Hence, we then had We Lead Boys Academy, which, by the way, flourished. We were able to break borders. We were able to go beyond borders. And this academy graduates boys, taking them through our own curriculum, and we're able to graduate over 35 boys in 2020 alone.
You talked about something that I find very interesting, especially when you said you just focus on boys. A lot of people would argue that there are so many organizations out there that are trying to strike a balance, focus on both young boys and young women. But for you, your particular interest is in boys. Why boys?
Going by statistics, if you go to correctional centers for young people, juvenile centers, you find out that when you compare the juvenile center for girls with the one for boys, you find the number going about ratio of 7 to 3. So you have about the numbers of young people in the correctional center. You have more boys committing crime. You have more boys getting into trouble. You have more boys in the height of the storm. So why not focus on boys? We need a healthy balance between both genders, hence our focus on boys. We see this gap clearly written. And if you talk to parents of boys, they will tell you that the society is actually sitting on a keg of gunpowder if we do not start talking to boys.
Interesting. You also talk about how you pay special attention to correctional facilities. Is there any reason why you chose to go into these facilities for younger men?
Yes, we are very deliberate about going to where we have the worst of cases. We thought to ourselves, we need a long-lasting relationship, a long-lasting engagement, an engagement that leaves these boys whole. Because we are leaving them, we know that we had actually sown a good seed in their life. Hence, we decided we are going to go to the correctional centers. And we started with the correctional centers for boys Oregu in Lagos. We worked with these centers for over a year, going there every weekend to teach our curriculum. These courses range from leadership to masculinity and sexuality, delayed gratification, failing forward, critical thinking. These are things that naturally will not be taught in schools.
Talk to me about the academy, the online academy. How are you able to interact with these boys when they're in these correctional facilities? Have you set up like computer labs in some of these facilities?
Yes, our aim is to put systems, computer systems in these facilities where we can teach these boys online. Parents bought into it. So boys from the UK, from the US, from Canada, from Ghana, from Nigeria, of course, logged into that program. We have about boys from about 7 to 8 countries.
When you interact with some of these boys, what are their stories? What are their aspirations? What is it that they want to do once they get out of these programs?
When you talk to these boys, you have potentials. So you find boys aspiring to be musicians, to be doctors, to be lawyers, to be sportsmen. Talents abound in this center. One Saturday that was one of the Saturdays we go to teach at the center. We got to the center and realized that one of the boys had just won a scholarship to study abroad. That was very, very heartwarming for us because it also shows that there are potentials residing in this center. And these potentials are just boundless. You need to hear, when these boys even speak, you are asking, why are you here?
Thank you so much for your time, Dayo.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much.
That was Africa 54's tech correspondent Paul Ndiho speaking to Dayo Oladele Ilori, founder of We Lead in Lagos, Nigeria. A Cameroonian company has created a veterinary counseling app designed to help farmers and ranchers detect animal diseases and give them guidance. The app is aimed at animal breeders who live in remote villages far from veterinarians. And Zwaku in Douala has this report, narrated by Moki Edwin Kinzeka.
Cameroonian rabbit breeder Thierry Bayebom lost 3/4 of his stock to disease a few months ago. Like most small-scale Cameroonian farmers, he was not familiar with diseases that affect animals. Bayebom says the deaths could have been prevented, but it took too long to find a veterinarian to visit his remote farm.
2 weeks after the cases, as the situation was getting worse, I succeeded to call a veterinarian. The vet came on site and was able to determine the problem.
To avoid such costly losses, a Cameroonian startup designed the free online application Veto. The app analyzes audio questions about symptoms, gives treatment advice, and helps breeders and ranchers share information. It also allows them to send photos and videos to actual veterinarians for analysis.
In those villages, they have no vet personnel, and with an advent of a zoonotic disease like tuberculosis, you taking the picture for the analysis may help you save lives, because zoonoses are diseases that attack both human or that are transmissible between animals to humans.
The Veto app's main challenge is that it requires an internet connection, which is expensive and hard to come by in Cameroon's remote villages. The app's developers say they are working on the problem so it can be useful to more people raising livestock.
Currently, our research and development teams are actively working to develop a module that is not connected to the internet so that it can operate in rural areas without the need for internet.
While the veterinary diagnostic app has connection limitations, its geographic area is not limited to Cameroon or even West Africa. The Veto app is currently available in Cameroon's official languages, French and English, and also in Arabic and Swahili. For Anne Zwanke in Douala, Cameroon, Moki Edwin Kinzeka for VOA News.
An innovative home recycling unit may revolutionize the world of recycling as we know it. Here's VOA's Julie Tabo with more.
When people dutifully collect and toss their used containers in a recycling bin, they believe they're doing something noble, recycling. But that's not really what they're doing, says Aldous Hicks.
The whole society has been told that what you're doing is the recycling, and you don't. No one does any recycling. You collect it for recycling.
But Hicks hopes to change that. He and his team have developed a machine that will allow consumers to actually recycle in their own homes. The machine will sort and clean and then grind plastic, glass, and metal containers into material that can then be used to make new products.
You can recycle virtually any used material so long as you don't mix it together. And that's called closed-loop recycling. So basically, this bottle or this container can be closely recycled back into that container.
A home recycling unit is one way of keeping our recyclable waste out of landfills, which is where 50% of it ends up, according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Another option has been to send it overseas. many developing countries view it as a valuable commodity.
Less wealthy countries will pay for those recyclables. They will import them. And the reason they import them is because they want them as cheap raw materials to be made into other stuff. And so I don't look at it as a problem. I look at it as an opportunity. How do we get more raw materials out of your recycling bin so we don't have to get them out of the ground?
As the world's population continues to grow, so does the need to find more innovative ways to handle the waste we're leaving behind. Julie Tabo, VOA News.
Burkina Faso has a growing comedy scene that, despite the international popularity of French Burkinabe comedian Rukiata Ouedraogo, is still dominated locally by men. But a fresh initiative hopes to change that, as Claire McDougall reports from Ouagadougou.
Rukiata Ouedraogo helped bridge the gap between French and Burkinabe comedy, becoming known in France and famous in her home country. But Burkina Faso's comedy scene is dominated by men in a country where women are expected to be housewives. The organizer of Ouagadougou's annual Festival of Laughter and Comedy hopes to change that through training.
À gérer toute la journée, elle ne fait que bosser à la maison. Et quand elle me met là un travail, elle travaille et puis elle revient.
All day it is working in the house. For comedy, you need time for reflection, writing good sketches, a good amount of words to share things you can perform in public.
The country's male comedians train 10 women on scripting, improvisation, and performance for the festival. They got support from the Ministry of Culture and Tourism.
There is also a cultural problem. In Burkina Faso, women are more reserved. They aren't so exposed. We want to take this warmth, this comedic oxygen, to say that women can make it.
The women comedians also hope they can help Burkina Faso, a country struggling with insecurity and displacement, to laugh again.
You are displaced without a home. You no longer have your village. You no longer have your parents. You are there, you are sad, almost wishing you were dead. For those who are like that, to offer one moment, a second of laughter, will offer hope.
With the stage set, the show can begin.
There are a lot of things for women to say, and they must become a voice for the voiceless. Women must be part of the comedy scene because humor has a message.
The experience has brought the women confidence and the possibility of careers as the leading ladies of comedy in Burkina Faso. Claire McDougall for VOA News, Ouagadougou.
That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.